Judges Corner is brought to you by CoolStuffInc.com, the best online retailer for Magic the Gathering singles and sealed product, and gatheringmagic.com, your place to explore the game. Now it's time for Judges Corner.
Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of Judges Corner. Today we're going to be going over activated abilities, and we're going to help you by distinguishing the difference between activated abilities and other types of abilities, as well as completely dissecting what an activated ability is, what it isn't, and how it works. One of the most common abilities in Magic are activated abilities. They're easily identified with some sort of cost, be it mana payment, a tap or untap symbol, or perhaps even some other action, like sacrificing the very card with the ability, or another card to pay for the ability. Sometimes these costs are even combined. After the cost, there is a colon to distinguish the separation between the cost and the ability. Finally, there is the listed ability in question, which really could say anything from add 1 mana of any color to your mana pool to gain control of target player, and much more. To activate the ability, you follow the same steps as with casting a spell, in which you first announce the ability and place it on the stack. Second, make any choices for the ability, like modes, the value of X, or anything else that requires a choice about the ability that isn't a target. Third, you then choose the targets, and fourth, how those targets are each affected. Fifth, you total the cost. Sixth, you activate any mana abilities, and seventh, you pay the costs in any order. During all of those steps, no one can normally play spells or abilities of their own, and once all of these steps are dealt with, the ability is officially considered activated and on the stack, and then all players will get a chance to respond before the ability resolves. So this means you can't normally stop an activated ability from happening, like with Fulminator Mage, by trying to dismember it in response to the activated ability before the cost of sacrificing it is paid, because that cost is paid as part of activating the ability in the final step. Furthermore, once an activated ability is on the stack, it's independent from the source. For example, destroying a Grim Lavamancer with its ability on the stack will not prevent the damage from eventually occurring, because the ability is essentially like the creature casting their own little shock. That line stating Grim Lavamancer deals 2 damage doesn't mean he needs to be around when it's finally time to resolve the ability. It just helps you understand where that damage is coming from, for things that care about the qualities of the source, like with Circle of Protection Red. So you might be wondering how you can stop these effects from resolving. You can counter a spell, but can you counter an ability? Well, yes. Not in the dissipate or cancel kind of sense, but rather with spells like Stifle, Squelch, or Trickbind. You can also do things the old-fashioned way, and make all of the targets illegal, so that the entire ability is countered by game rules. For example, if you were to give a creature targeted by Guava Hazid Shroud when the ability goes to resolve, it would be countered because the target is illegal, and the controller of that creature wouldn't draw a card. If you countered an ability, any costs paid are not refunded. Like, if you stifle a fetch land, the land stays in the graveyard despite the ability being countered to search for another land, because it was sacrificed as a cost to pay for the ability. Next, let's go over some other abilities to help distinguish the difference between those abilities and activated abilities. Activated abilities differ from triggered abilities, in that triggered abilities happen when a condition is met, like when a permanent enters the battlefield, or a spell is cast. They don't really have a say in when they can be activated, and are entirely reliant on a condition being met, while activated abilities can be activated at any time a player has priority, unless they state otherwise, like with Whip of Erebos. Continuous effects also differ from activated abilities, in that they're just always happening so long as the source of the ability is in play, like with the enchantment Honor of the Pure, that always gives white creatures you control +1/+1, or if they're in the appropriate zone, like with the creature Anger in your graveyard while you control a mountain, to give all of your creatures you control haste. Replacement effects are also different from activated abilities, in that instead of being activated at will, they simply replace part or all of an effect with something else entirely, at the exact moment before the event they're replacing happens, without using the stack. Morphing, manifesting, or megamorphing a creature face-up might seem like an activated ability, but in reality, they're special actions that a player can take that doesn't use the stack. They do have an associated cost, but there is no activated ability per se, just an action taken and a cost paid to fulfill that action. The lack of a colon is a great indicator of non-activated abilities. Like special actions, activated mana abilities don't use the stack. Tapping an Elvish Mystic or a Guild Signet for mana is an activated ability, but since those abilities meet the criteria for activated mana abilities, they don't use the stack and just happen immediately. Those criteria are that the activated ability produces mana, that the ability does not target, and that the ability is not a loyalty ability. Activated mana abilities can include other things and still remain activated mana abilities, like drawing a card off of Chromatic Sphere. Oh, and speaking of loyalty abilities, Planeswalkers also have a bunch of activated abilities. Every ability has a cost, adding or removing loyalty counters, which is paid immediately as the ability is put on the stack. It's important to note that, just like with our earlier example with Fulminator Mage and Grim Lavamancer, you cannot react before the player activating the ability pays for the cost of the ability, which in this case is adding or subtracting loyalty counters. And you also cannot react before they get an opportunity to use the ability, because when a spell or an ability resolves, like with a Planeswalker resolving, the player that cast that spell or activated that ability regains priority, which they can then use to activate the abilities like on their Planeswalker, assuming the stack is clear. To learn more about Planeswalkers and their loyalty abilities, check out our episode on Planeswalkers. Activated abilities can only be activated while the card with the ability is on the battlefield, unless the card states otherwise, like with Soul of Innistrad or Lightning Storm. And speaking of Lightning Storm, most of the time only permanents have activated abilities, but sometimes instants and sorceries also have activated abilities, like with Summon the School or Cycling. Well, that's it for the episode. If you have any questions about this episode or just any other questions in general, you can always send us an email at judgescorner@gatheringmagic.com or leave a comment below and myself or someone else will be happy to get back to you. And if you like this video, we'd like it if you liked it. It really helps us out a lot. Until next time, make sure to shuffle thoroughly, play at a reasonable pace, and have fun.